Captain Susan Miller looked at the big screen of the spaceship Star Voyager. She felt both excited and nervous. Her ship was sent to check out a strange signal from the Vega 7 star system, which no human had visited before. What they found was nothing like what they expected. "Are you sure about these readings?" she asked her science officer. Lieutenant Paul Wilson nodded without looking away from his computer. "Yes, Captain. The planet has many life forms we've never seen before. And these energy patterns, they're completely new to us." Officer Lily Carter spoke up from her station. "Captain, we're getting a message from Space Command. Admiral Johnson wants to know what we found." "Tell him we'll send a report soon," Miller replied. She stood up straight. "Wilson, Bell, Brown, come with me. We're going down to the planet in a small ship." Security Chief Jack Bell looked worried. "Captain, maybe we should scan more before landing." "I hear you, Bell," Miller cut in. "But our job is to make contact, and Command wants results. Our scans don't show any weapons or advanced technology. I don't think whatever's down there is an immediate danger." The trip down to the planet was smooth. As they flew through the atmosphere, everyone went quiet in amazement. Vega 7 was beautiful, huge purple forests spread out everywhere with bright blue rivers cutting through them. They landed in a clearing near what looked like some kind of settlement. As soon as they touched down, biologist Dr. Amy Brown started taking samples and measurements. "We can breathe the air," she told everyone. "Oxygen is a bit higher than Earth, but it's safe. No dangerous germs or poisons in the air." Miller nodded. "You can take off your helmets if you want, but stay alert." They had only walked a few steps from their ship when they heard it, a deep, rumbling growl that made the ground shake. Bell quickly pulled out his weapon and looked toward the trees. "Captain," Wilson whispered, pointing to the edge of the forest. A huge creature came out of the trees. It stood at least 12 feet tall with 6 strong arms ending in sharp claws. Its body was covered in shiny scales that changed colors as it moved. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth and big enough to swallow a person whole. Most scary were its 8 eyes placed all around its big head, each glowing yellow. "Don't move," Miller whispered. "Bell, keep your weapon ready, but don't shoot unless I say so." The creature walked slowly toward them, making the ground shake with each step. It stopped about 20 feet away, all 8 eyes focused on the humans. Then it opened its huge mouth, showing even more teeth, and made a sound that was part roar, part hiss. Dr. Brown gasped. It's beautiful," she said softly. Miller looked at her in disbelief. "Beautiful? That thing could tear us apart in seconds. Look at how its scales glow and change color," Brown continued, seeming to forget the danger. "And those amazing arms. What incredible evolution." Before Miller could reply, Bell stepped in front of her with his weapon raised. "It's coming closer, Captain." The creature was indeed moving closer, its huge head lowered to look at the humans better. Miller got ready to order everyone back to the ship. But then Brown did something surprising. She took a food bar from her pack, unwrapped it, and held it out to the creature. "Brown, what are you doing?" Miller hissed. The biologist ignored her and took a small step forward. "It's okay," she said quietly. To everyone's shock, the huge beast gently reached out with a smaller arm, one they hadn't noticed before, and carefully took the food from Brown's hand. It sniffed the bar curiously before eating it. Then something amazing happened. The creature made a sound like a purr, a deep, rumbling vibration that seemed happy, and its scales turned a soft pink color. "It's thanking me," Brown whispered in wonder. Miller couldn't believe what she was seeing. This scary predator that should have been attacking them was acting more like a giant house cat than a monster. "Captain," Wilson said, checking his scanner. "More life forms are coming from the north." Right on cue, more creatures came out of the forest. These were smaller, only about 9 feet tall, but looked similar to the first one. They approached carefully, their scales changing through different colors. "Maybe a family group?" Brown suggested. "The big one might be a parent or guardian." The first creature turned to the others and made a series of complex sounds, clicks, purrs, and low rumbles. The others answered with similar sounds, their scales flashing with light. They're talking to each other, Wilson said, recording everything. Complex sounds combined with color signals. The first creature turned back to the humans and, to their continued amazement, lowered itself to the ground in what looked like a peaceful gesture. It then reached out one of its arms toward Brown, the limb flat and turned up in what was clearly an invitation. "I think it wants me to touch it," Brown said, her voice shaking with excitement. "Absolutely not," Miller said firmly. "We need to go back to the ship and—" But Brown had already stepped forward and placed her hand on the creature's arm. The effect was immediate. The creature's scales burst into a brilliant display of shifting colors, and all 8 of its eyes closed in what looked like happiness. "Captain," Brown said, turning to Miller with tears in her eyes, "it's not dangerous, it's friendly." Miller didn't know what to say. Everything she'd learned about first contact seemed wrong in the face of this unexpected situation. These creatures, scary as they looked, were showing signs of intelligence, communication, and most surprisingly, gentleness. "Wilson," she said finally, "call the ship. Tell them to inform Space Command that we've made contact with an intelligent species, and add that we may need to rethink what we consider threatening." As if understanding her words, the creature gave another rumbling purr and gently nudged Brown with its massive head. "I think I'll call you Fluffy," Brown said, patting its scales. Bell lowered his weapon and sighed. The admirals are never going to believe this. 6 months after meeting the creatures of Vega 7, humans and aliens were getting along well. Earth scientists officially named the aliens chromoscales, but most humans just called them floofs because they were so gentle. 3 more human ships had joined the Star Voyager at the planet. The humans had built a small base where scientists studied the aliens and their world. Dr. Amy Brown had become famous both on Earth and among the floofs. Her bravery in approaching Fluffy, who turned out to be an important elder in floof society, had started peaceful relations between humans and aliens. "We're getting better at understanding their language," she told Captain Miller as they walked around the base. "We've found over 300 different sounds they make, and we're learning their color-based communication too." Miller nodded, watching some young floofs playing with human children who had arrived on the last supply ship. Even though the young floofs were nearly 8 feet tall with sharp claws, they were very gentle with the human kids, being careful not to hurt them. "It's still hard to believe," Miller said. "When we first saw them, I was sure they were going to eat us." Brown laughed. "That's what humans always do. We think scary-looking things must be dangerous. The floofs thought the same about us." Miller looked surprised. "They were afraid of us?" "Yes, very afraid at first," Brown said. "The way we stand upright, show our teeth when we smile, and how we move. They thought we looked like predators." Fluffy told me later that approaching us that first day was one of the bravest things she ever did. She thought we might attack her. Just then, Dr. Joe Smith, the medical officer, came over looking confused. "I just had the strangest experience with one of the floofs," he said. "The young one we call Sparkles came to the medical room with a hurt arm. I fixed it, just a small cut, but after that, he gave me this." Smith held up a small, beautifully woven object made from local plants and decorated with tiny glowing stones. Brown's eyes got big. "That's a friendship token. It's very important in floof culture. They usually only give these to family members." "Family?" Smith looked confused. "I just put a bandage on his cut. To them, healing is sacred," Brown explained. "By treating his injury, you've basically been adopted into his family. Congratulations, doctor, you're now officially a floof parent." Smith stared at the token. "What does that mean I have to do?" "Nothing too hard," Brown assured him. "Just go to a few of their celebrations. Let him bring you food sometimes. Oh, and if he ever has babies, you'll need to help groom them." Smith looked shocked. "I'm a doctor, not a whatever this makes me." Miller couldn't help laughing. "Welcome to dealing with aliens, doctor. Sometimes it gets personal." Later that evening, Miller joined a gathering outside the base where humans and floofs had started a nightly tradition of sharing stories. Tonight it was the aliens' turn, and Fluffy was the storyteller. With Brown translating, Fluffy told a story about ancient floof warriors who once defended their home against huge predators from the southern continent. As she spoke, her scales rippled with colors that showed the emotions in the story. And though the great beasts were bigger than even the tallest of our ancestors, Brown translated as Fluffy's scales turned deep purple, we didn't fear their size, but their coldness. Unlike us, they had no color in their souls, no warmth in their hearts. They killed not for food or defense, but simply because they could. The human children listened with wide eyes as Brown continued translating Fluffy's story. Our ancestors knew they couldn't match the beasts in strength, so they used their minds instead. They learned to change their colors to match the forest, becoming invisible to the predators. They learned to talk without sound using light and color patterns. And when the time was right, they all worked together, not to kill the beasts but to drive them back to their own lands. When the story ended, one of the human children raised his hand. "Were you scared of the monsters?" he asked Fluffy. Brown translated both the question and answer. Fluffy says her people have a saying, "Don't fear the creature with many teeth, but the one that never shows them." She says they were afraid of humans at first because we hide our true nature by being still and making small movements. But now they know that inside our strange, small bodies are spirits as bright and colorful as their scales. Commander Dan Rogers, who had recently arrived from Earth as a diplomatic officer, leaned toward Miller. "This changes everything about how we approach first contact," he whispered. "All these years we've been trying to appear friendly, when some aliens might actually find that suspicious." Miller nodded. "The galaxy is more complicated than we thought, and what we think is scary, others might find cute." "Speaking of cute," Rogers said, pointing to where Dr. Smith was now surrounded by young floofs, all trying to groom his hair while he sat looking resigned to his fate. "I think the doctor's new family is bonding with him. He'll get used to it," Miller said with a smile. "We all will. That's what humans do best." As if to prove her point, one of the smaller human children had fallen asleep against Fluffy's side, tiny fingers holding one of her shiny scales. The massive alien had wrapped a protective arm around the child, her scales glowing with a soft, soothing blue light. "You know," Miller said, watching the scene, "when we tell other humans about the floofs, most won't believe us until they see for themselves." Rogers laughed. "Can you blame them? Who would believe that the most dangerous-looking aliens we've ever met would turn out to be basically space kittens?" The comparison was good. Despite looking scary, the floofs were curious, playful, and very caring. Not just to their own kind, but to humans too. They seemed truly upset whenever humans showed fear of them and tried hard to look less threatening, often curling up into smaller shapes around human visitors. "The admirals back home are already talking about changing our first contact rules," Rogers continued. "They're calling them the Vega 7 protocols." Miller smiled. "I like that name." As the night went on, more stories were shared from both cultures. The humans told tales of dragons and monsters, made-up creatures that the floofs found fascinating and funny, especially the idea that humans would invent scary creatures when they had so few natural predators on Earth. In return, the floofs shared legends of small, delicate beings from the stars who brought wisdom and healing, stories that sounded like they might be about early meetings with other aliens, maybe even humans from forgotten explorations. By the time everyone went to bed, Miller felt more hopeful than she had since her first days in the space program. The galaxy was full of surprises, and not all of them were bad. Sometimes the scariest-looking things had the gentlest hearts. And sometimes, she thought, watching Dr. Smith being given a crown of glowing flowers by his adopted floof family, the universe had a sense of humor. 1 year after humans first met the floofs, the Vega 7 star system had become a center for space diplomacy. The news had spread through the Galactic Council, a group of space-traveling alien species, about the strange friendship between humans and the creatures they lovingly called floofs. Captain Susan Miller stood in the newly built meeting hall, watching as members from 12 different alien species came in for the emergency meeting. As the human who knew the floofs best, she had been chosen as Earth's special representative. "This is something completely new," said Ambassador John Ward, her diplomatic advisor. Half the council races wouldn't even come close to Vega 7 before we made friends with the floofs. Miller understood why. The screens around the hall showed various council members reacting with fear as Fluffy and several other floofs entered the room. The lizard-like Saurans hissed in alarm, their head crests standing up. The bug-like Tsar gripped their ceremonial staffs tighter, their mouthparts clicking nervously. Even the usually calm Valerians, energy beings living in robot bodies, seemed to shrink back. "They're really scared," Miller whispered to Ward. "They truly think the floofs are dangerous." "Can you blame them?" Ward replied. "According to council records, 3 different missions to Vega 7 ended badly before we arrived. No survivors, no messages after landing. Everyone thought the planet had vicious predators." Miller frowned. That didn't match what she knew about the gentle creatures. "There must be an explanation. The floofs we've met wouldn't hurt anyone." Before Ward could answer, Grand Counselor Zixor of the Valerians called the meeting to order. His mechanical voice echoed through the room. "We are here to discuss the human relationship with the terrors of Vega 7, he announced. "For generations, this world has been marked on our star maps with the highest danger warning. Now, strangely, humans not only survive there but claim to be friends with the native predators." Fluffy, who had been quietly settling her huge body onto a specially built platform, suddenly made a series of soft clicks and purrs. Her scales changed to a questioning blue-green color. Dr. Amy Brown, who now spoke fluff language fluently, translated. "Elder Fluffy is confused by the word predators. She says her people are gatherers and farmers. They have not hunted for food in thousands of generations." This caused a stir among the council members. The Soren representative stood up, pointing an accusing claw at Fluffy. "Lies," he hissed. "We sent a research team to Vega 7 60 cycles ago. Their last message showed creatures exactly like these attacking their camp." Fluffy's scales darkened, with what Miller now knew was distress. After a complex series of sounds and color changes, Brown translated again. "Elder Fluffy says there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Her people approached the visitors with welcome gifts and greeting displays. When the visitors pulled out weapons, the floofs left in confusion and sadness." "What about the other missions?" demanded a Tsar representative, its antennas shaking. 3 missions, all lost." After talking with Fluffy and the other floofs, Brown's face showed sudden understanding. "I think I know what happened," she said. "The floofs approached all visitors the same way, with what they thought were friendly gestures, but to other species those gestures looked threatening." Miller stepped forward. "Think about how the floofs look," she suggested to the council. "Their size, their claws, their teeth, all evolved for gathering tough plants, not for hunting. But to most of us, they look designed for killing." "And humans?" asked Grand Counselor Zixor. "Why were you not frightened away or killed?" "Oh, we were terrified at first," Miller admitted. "But one of our scientists offered food instead of pointing a weapon. That simple act changed everything." Lieutenant Paul Wilson, who had been studying data from the council archives, suddenly spoke. "I've looked at the final messages from all 3 lost missions. In each case, the visitors responded to the floofs by firing weapons or taking defensive positions, which the floofs would have seen as hostile," Brown added. "They wouldn't have attacked, but they would have left and avoided further contact." "But the missions were lost," insisted the Soren representative. "All crew members vanished." Fluffy talked briefly with her companions, then made a series of elaborate gestures. Her scales rippled through a complex pattern that Brown had never seen before. "She says they can show us what happened," Brown translated, sounding surprised. "They've kept the places where the visitors landed as memorial grounds. Within hours, a group including representatives from each council race was taken down to Vega 7's surface. Fluffy led them through thick purple forests to a small clearing, where the remains of an alien camp were still visible, though now covered with local plants. "This was the Saran expedition," Brown explained as Fluffy pointed to the site. "The floofs never disturbed it, hoping the visitors would return." Wilson scanned the area with his equipment. "There are no bodies, no signs of violence," he reported. "But I am detecting energy traces matching a ship's emergency teleport system," the Saran representative hissed in surprise. Our ships have automatic emergency recall. If the crew thought they were under attack, they would have triggered the system," Miller finished. "They teleported back to their ships and fled, thinking they'd barely escaped with their lives. And with no survivors to tell what actually happened, the stories of the dangerous monsters of Vega 7 would have grown over time," Ward added. The group visited 2 more similar sites, each telling the same story: misunderstanding, fear, retreat, and abandonment. At the 3rd site, Fluffy's scales turned a solemn gray as she gestured toward a small monument the Floofs had built. "She says they've honored the memory of those who came before, hoping someday to explain and make peace," Brown translated. They never understood why the visitors were so afraid of them. Back at the council meeting hall, the mood had changed dramatically. The representatives who had been most fearful now seemed thoughtful, even embarrassed. Grand Counselor Zixer addressed the assembly. "It seems we have allowed appearance to affect our judgment. The humans have shown that even the most seemingly dangerous species may have peaceful intentions. Perhaps it is no accident that humans were the ones to bridge this gap," suggested the Volarian. "Your species has a unique tendency to find, what is your word? Cuteness in unexpected forms." Miller couldn't help but smile. It was true. Humans had a strange ability to be charmed by things that might reasonably be considered frightening. From spiders to sharks, there were human fans who found beauty and appeal in Earth's most dangerous creatures. "It's part of our nature," she acknowledged. "We look beyond appearance to find connection." The council session ended with a historic decision. The Floofs would be formally invited to join the Galactic Council, with humans serving as their sponsors and cultural interpreters. The warning beacons around Vega 7 were turned off, and the system was reclassified as a diplomatic hub. As the representatives filed out, Dr. Joe Smith approached Miller looking slightly harassed. His hair was elaborately braided and decorated with glowing beads, the work of his adopted Floof family, who had insisted on preparing him for the important meeting. "Well, that went better than expected," he said. "Though I could have done without being the living example of Floof grooming techniques during the cultural exchange portion." Miller laughed. "You're a pioneer in relations between species, Doctor. Besides, I think the council members were especially impressed when Sparkles declared you the most beautifully adorned human he'd ever seen." Smith sighed. "The things we do for diplomacy." As they watched Fluffy being cautiously approached by curious representatives from other species, Miller felt a sense of pride. What had begun as a routine exploration mission had become something much more important, a reminder that in the vast diversity of galactic life, appearances could be deeply misleading. "You know," Smith said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what makes the Floof so special to us. It's not just that they're gentle despite looking dangerous, it's that they see past how we look too. To them, we're the strange, unsettling aliens, yet they welcomed us." Miller nodded. "That's the real lesson here, isn't it? True connection happens when both sides move past fear." Across the hall, a small Tsar child was being gently lifted onto Fluffy's broad back, its initial terror giving way to joy as the massive, Floof scales rippled with playful patterns of light. Other council members watched in amazement as this scene that would have been unthinkable mere hours ago unfolded before them. "I think," Miller said with a smile, "the galaxy may never be quite the same again." 5 years after the Floofs joined the Galactic Council, the Star Voyager was finishing its final mission under Captain Susan Miller's command. After years of groundbreaking diplomatic work, she had been promoted to Admiral and would soon lead the new Interspecies Relations Division at Space Command. As Miller packed her things in her room, she thought about how much had changed since that first landing on Vega 7. What started as a simple first contact mission had grown into a complete rethinking of how space-traveling species interacted with each other. A soft chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Dr. Amy Brown walked in, now wearing the badge of the Xenobiology Institute's director. Her hair had more gray than when they'd first met, but her eyes still showed the same excitement. "I thought you might want to see this before it's officially released," Brown said, handing Miller a datapad. The latest version of the Galactic Council's first contact rules, the ones you helped write. Miller scrolled through the document, smiling as she read the introduction. First Contact Assessment Protocol, the Miller Fluffy Guidelines Rule. 1. Appearance does not show intent or nature. Species that look predatory may be peaceful, those that look harmless may be dangerous. Rule 2. Cultural context determines how gestures and actions are understood. What looks like a threat in one culture may be a greeting in another. Rule 3. Initial misunderstandings should be expected and planned for. Communication attempts should continue through multiple approaches and methods. They named it after us, Miller said, feeling touched. After you and Fluffy, Brown corrected. It seemed right. Your willingness to look beyond appearances and her patience with our clumsy first attempts at communication. Together you changed everything. Miller set down the pad. How is the old girl anyway? Doing great, Brown replied with a grin. She's been named head elder of the Floof Diplomatic Corps. Turns out their society had space travel ambitions long before we arrived. They just never found anyone willing to talk to them instead of running away screaming. A notification appeared. On Miller's screen, an incoming message from Space Command. Speaking of diplomacy, Miller said, activating the display. The face that appeared belonged to Commander Dan Rogers, now heading the Vega 7 diplomatic station. Admiral, he greeted Miller with a smile. I thought you'd want to hear the news right away. The Sorens have just announced they're building a permanent cultural exchange center on Vega 7. Miller raised her eyebrows in surprise. The Sorens? They were the most afraid of the Floofs at that first council meeting. Rogers nodded. And now they're leading the movement for increased integration. Ever since their children started attending the interspecies education program with Floof caregivers, public opinion has changed dramatically. They're calling the Floofs the Great Protectors now. From monsters to protectors in 5 years, Miller mused. That's quite a change. That's not all, Rogers continued. The Tsar have requested Floof security teams for their diplomatic missions to non-council worlds. Apparently, having 12-foot, multi-limbed escorts with razor claws tends to discourage pirates and raiders. Miller laughed. I can imagine. After finishing her call with Rogers, Miller continued packing. She paused when she found a small woven token, her own friendship gift from Fluffy, received on the day she'd been ceremonially adopted into the Elder's family. Brown noticed her looking at it. You know, the Floofs have a saying now. To be feared is lonely. To be loved is to belong. They've certainly found belonging, Miller agreed. Have you seen the latest tourism reports? Vega 7 has become the third most visited planet in Council space. Everyone wants to see the adorable monsters for themselves. The gift shop can barely keep up with demand for stuffed Floof toys, Brown added with a laugh. There's a 6-month waiting list for the life-sized ones. The ship's communicator chimed again. Admiral Miller to the bridge. We're approaching Space Command Station. As they walked to the bridge, Miller and Brown passed several crew members saying goodbye. Among them was Dr. Joe Smith, now sporting an impressive beard decorated with Floof friendship beads. He had long since embraced his status as an adopted parent in Fluffy's clan. Admiral, he said, saluting Miller. I wanted to let you know I've accepted a permanent position at the Vega 7 Medical Exchange. Sparkles insists I'm needed to train the next generation of interspecies healthcare providers. They couldn't have chosen a better teacher, Miller told him warmly. Though I suspect your grooming sessions will continue to be mandatory. Smith sighed dramatically, but the twinkle in his eye showed his affection for his alien family. Some sacrifices are worth making for science and diplomacy. On the bridge, Lieutenant Paul Wilson, now Commander Wilson, stood ready to take temporary command of the Star Voyager until its new captain arrived. Approaching Space Command, Admiral, he reported, and you might want to see this. He pointed toward the view screen, which showed an extraordinary sight. Lining the approach to the station were ships from dozens of different species, all formed in an honor guard pattern. At the center, most prominently placed, were 3 massive Floof vessels, their first independently built starships, designed, with help from human engineers, "They're honoring you, Admiral," Wilson said quietly. "All of them." Miller felt a lump in her throat. "Not just me," she replied. "All of us who were willing to look past appearances, all of us who chose connection over fear." As the Star Voyager docked at Space Command, Miller received one final message, this one directly from Vega 7. On the screen appeared Fluffy, her scales shimmering with the deep gold that showed profound emotion among her people. No translation was needed. After years of cultural exchange, Miller understood the Floof's color language fluently. Fluffy was expressing gratitude, hope, and family love, emotions that went beyond physical appearances and bridged the vast differences between their species. "I feel the same way, old friend," Miller said softly. Later, at the formal ceremony transferring command of the Star Voyager, Miller stood before the assembled officers and diplomatic representatives from throughout the Council. Her promotion speech had been prepared for weeks, but as she looked out at the diverse gathering, humans standing with Saurans, Tsar, Valerians, and a group of Floofs towering benevolently over them all, she set aside her prepared remarks. "5 years ago," she began, "we discovered something that changed our understanding of the galaxy. Not a new technology or a scientific breakthrough, but a simple truth that had escaped us for generations, that our perceptions are shaped by our expectations and that beauty and danger rarely match our preconceptions." She gestured toward the Floof delegation, their scales shifting through patterns of attentive blues and purples. "We went looking for new life forms and found not just allies, but friends. Not just diplomatic partners, but family. And in doing so, we've begun to change how all species in the Council relate to one another." A small commotion at the back of the hall caught her attention. A group of human children had entered, each accompanied by a young Floof. The children were graduates of the first interspecies education program, raised alongside Floof younglings from birth. One little girl, no more than 6 years old, was riding on the back of a young Floof, her small hands patting its scales affectionately as it carefully moved through the crowd. To her, there was nothing frightening about the massive creature. It was simply her friend, her classmate, her playmate. Miller smiled at the sight. "That," she said, pointing to the children, "is our future. A generation that looks beyond appearances, that seeks connection rather than retreating in fear. A generation that will venture into the stars not just with courage, but with curiosity and compassion." She turned back to the assembled dignitaries. "As I take on my new role, I carry with me the most important lesson of Vega 7, that in a universe of endless diversity, our greatest strength lies not in our ability to defend against the unknown, but in our willingness to embrace it." The ceremony ended with a Floof tradition, a harmonized purring that filled the hall, accompanied by a wave of color across their scales, creating a living light show that left the audience in awe. As Miller prepared to board the shuttle that would take her to her new post, Dr. Brown handed her one final report. "The xenobiology team just confirmed it," she said excitedly. "The Floof's view of humans as adorable but initially frightening isn't unique. We've found 14 other species who find human appearance both endearing and unsettling." Miller laughed. "So we're someone else's terrifying monsters? And their beloved pets, apparently," Brown replied with a grin. "The Zenari ambassador told me last week that they've been collecting human memorabilia for years. They find our tiny, delicate limbs and round, expressive eyes utterly charming." "The galaxy's full of surprises," Miller said, shaking her head in amusement. As her shuttle departed from the Star Voyager for the last time, Miller looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had begun with a simple mission and ended up changing the galaxy forever.